All right, good morning, good afternoon, happy Friday. This is Mr. Trutna coming to you live from San Jose, where I happen to be today. So this would be for periods of 1 and 2 and 3 and 4 and 7. Okay, so what we're going to do is we're going to go over Unit 3 Worksheet C. We're going to do a couple problems that I assigned to you on Wednesday or Thursday. Then I'm going to do a couple problems that I have not assigned to you yet. And then I'm going to assign you the remaining problems for the worksheet, okay? Since I won't see you on today, Friday, have a great weekend. We'll catch you on Monday. Have fun at homecoming tonight. And let's go ahead and get started. So this is we're going to start about number 3, at number 3. So in number 3, what we have here is we are given that line A to C, and hold on 1 second, let me zoom this in right here. There we go. If we happen to be in 4th period right now, Petey, stop talking to Jesus. Thank you very much. Okay, so moving on. So number 3, we are given that line A to C is congruent to line A to D. Line C to B is congruent to line B to D. And then we're going to prove that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ABD. Okay, so just to give you a visual of what is going on, what we were doing is we are going to prove that triangle ABC, which is the triangle that I'm coloring in yellow in the yellow piece of paper, that's probably not the best idea, you can see it a little bit though, is going to be congruent to triangle ABD, which is what I am coloring in green. So what we're trying to do is, or what we will do is, we're not going to try, we're actually going to do it. We're going to prove that those two triangles are congruent. Okay, and if you notice, I have 2 bits of given information. So remember, the strategy in order to write out a 2-column proof is the first statement that you always write is your first proof. So we are given that line segment A to C is congruent to line segment A to D, and then what we do is we're going to write the reason for that. Okay, the reason is, how do I know that A to C is congruent to A to D? Well, that was given to me. So reason number 1 would be given. Okay, and then remember, like we talked about in class, every time that you make a statement that says 2 pieces are congruent to each other, you need to go to your diagram and you need to mark that. So we need to mark that A to C is congruent to segment A to D, and we're going to mark that with those single tick marks right there. Okay, and then I have a second given. So I'm going to write this second given, C to B, is congruent to B to D as my second statement. Okay, once again, what's my reason for that statement being written? Well, that was also given to me as well. Now what I do is, once I mark that, or once I have written that down, I am saying that C to B is congruent to B to D. I need to go to my diagram and I need to mark that. So line segment C to B, I'm going to put 2 tick marks there. It's congruent to line segment B to D, so I'm going to put 2 tick marks right there. Okay, all right, so right now, and then I have no other givens that I can write down. Okay, but you can see in my diagram, I don't have enough information yet to say that the yellow triangle, which is ABC, is congruent to the green triangle, which is ABD. I need something else. And hopefully you should see that this line segment right here, A to B, which goes right through the middle, is actually equal to itself in both of the triangles. So that'll be our third statement. We're going to say that A to B in the yellow triangle is congruent to A to B in the green triangle. Okay, and then I'm going to mark that in my picture with 3 tick marks. And my reason for that is, remember, when something is congruent to itself, that reason is what we call the reflexive property. Think of the reflexive property as a mirror. You see your reflection in the mirror, of course, and what you see is the exact same thing in the mirror. Okay, so now you can see that based upon my marks in my picture, I now have enough marks, I have enough information to prove that triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ABD. And what we do is we're going to write that statement, that prove statement, we call this the prove statement, as our very last statement in our proof. So triangle ABC is congruent to triangle ABD, And my reason for that is going to be one of the 5 rules that I use to say triangles congruent. And you can see that these 2 triangles have 3 congruent sides. So my reason would be side, side, side. Okay, so that would be what the proof of number 3 would most likely look like. Okay, so what's the strategy that we use? Well, the strategy is, remember, we're always writing the given information first. Then if we don't have enough information, we're finding more information based upon what we know about geometry. And then the very last statement you will always write will exactly match up with whatever your proof statement is. And then your last statement, if it's comparing 2 triangles being congruent, your reason is going to be one of the 5 rules that we have. All right, so we have that right there. Okay, so now let's skip over to number 5. Now, number 5 I did not assign to you on Wednesday or Thursday, so we're going to do number 5 together, and basically what you're doing at this point in time is you are just copying down what I am doing. Okay, so let's read it out. So the given line segment A to B is congruent to line segment B to C. And there's another given that says line segment B to D bisects angle ABC. And then what we're going to do is we are going to prove that triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD. So once again, to give you a visual of what we're proving, we are proving that triangle ABD, which I am outlining in yellow on a yellow piece of paper. I know that doesn't make any sense, but hey, we got it. And then triangle CBD, which I'm outlining in green. So ultimately, I'm going to prove that those 2 triangles are congruent to one another. And you can see in number 5, the statements have already been written out for you. So it's kind of been, the proof has been set up for you. All we have to do is, we have to come up for what is the reason for each one of the statements, and then we need to make the appropriate marks in the picture. So statement number 1 says that A to B, so line segment A to B is congruent to line segment B to C. And you can see that right there, that's a given. So my reason for statement number 1 is going to be given, and then I'm going to go to my diagram and I'm going to mark line segment A to B congruent to line segment B to D, and I'm going to do that with a single tick mark. Okay, my second statement is line segment B to D bisects angle ABC, and you can see right here that is your second given. So I'm just going to put a check here because I noticed that I wrote down, so I'm going to write given. My reason for statement number 2 is given. Okay, now, because statement number 2 does not specifically say that I have congruent parts, okay, that means I'm not going to go to my diagram and I'm not going to mark anything. You only make marks on the diagram when you make a statement that actually says that pieces are congruent. Okay? Repeat after me with that. You only, good job, make a mark on your diagram, when pieces are actually marked, written as congruent. When pieces are actually marked, written, and congruent. Kobe, if we're in 7th period right now, thank you very much for participating there. I appreciate it. Hunter, pair. If we're in 2nd period, you probably want to wake up and pay attention. Okay, so statement number 3 says that angle ABD is congruent to angle CBD. So I'm going to mark that in my picture. To mark angle ABD, that means you start at A, you move along to B, and then you take a turn for D. And right where you make the turn, that's that angle. So we're talking about that little angle right there. It is congruent to angle CBD. To mark angle CBD, that means we start at C, we move along the line to B, and then we're going to take a turn for D, and right where we take the turn, that's the angle. So we are talking about those 2 little angles right there. Okay, so why do we know that those 2, what's my reason that those 2 angles are going to be congruent? All right, well, this is where we have to look at the statement above it. The statement above it says that line B to D bisects angle ABC. ABC is this big angle right here. All right, this is where you have to understand what geometry means. Remember, bisect means that we are going to bisect an angle into 2 equal angles. So number 3, those 2 angles are congruent because of the definition of bisect. The word bisect literally means to cut into two equal pieces. If I bisect, if I cut an angle into two equal angles, those are the two equal angles. Hopefully you understand that. Okay, number 4, statement number 4 says that line segment B to D is congruent to line segment B to D. So in other words, it's saying that this line segment right here is the same as itself in the yellow and the green triangle. All right, what is the reason for that? That is the reflexive property. Once again, whenever something is equal to itself, the property for that mathematically is called the reflexive property. All right, so now and I made my mark, so now you could hopefully see that I have enough marks to make my 5th statement, which says that triangle ABD is congruent to triangle CBD. Now remember the strategy. The last statement you write is whatever you're trying to prove. Okay, and why do we know that? What's my reason that we know that the triangle, the green triangle, is congruent to the yellow triangle? Well, we have a side, we have an angle and a side, and the angle is between the two sides, so my reason would be side, angle, side. All right, so there is number 5 right there. So that's how we would do number 5. Okay, let's move on to number 7. Let's write the proof out for number 7. Number 7 was not assigned to you on Wednesday or Thursday, so you have not done this yet, so we're going to do it together. Okay, so we're given that line segment HI is congruent to line segment GJ. We are also told that line segment HI, and then we have this symbol right here. And if you've never seen that symbol right there before, that symbol right there, those two lines, that means that they're parallel. So that symbol right there is the symbol for parallel lines. So what we're saying is that line segment HI is parallel to line segment GJ. And we're going to prove that triangle GJH, so GJH, I'm going to give you a visual of that, which would be this triangle right here, which I'm coloring in yellow on the yellow paper, don't judge, is congruent to triangle IHJ. Triangle IHJ I'm coloring in green. All right, there we go. So to give you a visual, I'm proving that the yellow triangle is congruent to the green triangle. Okay, so once again in number 7, the statements have been filled out for you. All right, and the reason why this was done is so you can get the idea of the strategy that you use in order to make a 2-column proof. So the very first statement, statement number 1, is line segment HI is congruent to line segment GJ. You could see that that is the given. So my reason for statement number 1 is given. Now, anytime I say two pieces are congruent to each other, like in statement number 1, I want to go to my shape and I want to mark it, or my diagram and mark it. So H to I, I'm going to put a tick mark. It's congruent to segment G to J, so I'm going to put a tick mark. Okay, statement number 2. Remember, this is read as line segment HI is parallel to line segment GJ. All right, well, that's right there, and that is given. So statement number 2 is given. And now I want to go to my picture. Got to pay the energy bill once again. I'm walking around the classroom right now. There we go. All right, so the lights are back on. I had the microwave running. Sorry, I was heating up a chimichanga. So when I'm done with this, I can eat. Okay, so anyhow, moving on. Sorry, I digress. So how do you mark that H to I is parallel to G to J? Well, remember, to mark that two segments are parallel, we use arrows. So we're going to put arrow at line segment H to I. We're going to put an arrow at line segment G to J, and those arrows tell us that H to I is parallel to G to J. Okay, statement number 3 says that angle GJH, so let's mark that, is congruent to angle IHJ. So let's mark those angles. GJH, that would be that angle right there, is congruent to angle IHJ, so that would be that angle right there. Okay, remember, if I'm marking angle IHJ, I start at I, I go along to H, I take a turn for J, and right where you take the turn, it's that angle right there. So those two angles are equal. Okay, now the question is, what's the reason? Well, it's not given. So what I have to do is I have to use some of my knowledge about geometry and say to myself, holy cow, how do I know, what's a way that I can tell if angles are actually equal to one another? All right, well, if you notice, you were given these notes earlier in the last week on Friday, and if you notice right here, it says reason angles are congruent. So if you ever make a statement where two angles are congruent and it doesn't come from the given, you are going to use one of these reasons right here. There's 6 reasons you could use for angles are congruent. This comes right from your notes from Friday. You could say it's a given. You could say they're vertical angles. You could say they're alternate interior angles. You could say they're alternate exterior angles. You could say they're corresponding angles, or you could use the definition of angle bisector. Remember, a bisector will create 2 congruent angles. But here's a clue to you right here. If you notice, these 3 right here, corresponding angles, alternate exterior angles, and alternate interior angles, say you must have parallel lines. So this is a clue to you. So this means if we have parallel lines, you might have one of these 3 circumstances, and those angles are congruent. So, and we do have parallel lines. So the question is, what type of angles are those 2 angles? What makes them congruent? Are they alternate interior, alternate exterior, or corresponding? They are alternate interior. How do I know that? Well, because they're on the inside of the shape. And they're on alternate sides of H to J. So my reason for number 3 would be alternate interior angles, which remember we abbreviated as AIA. Okay, if that freaks you out, you could write alternate. If the abbreviation freaks you out, you could write alternate interior angles. All right. Okay. Statement number 4 says line segment H to J is congruent to line segment H to J. So it is saying that it is equal to itself. Well, what property is that? We've talked about this a couple times already in this video. That is the reflexive property. So number 4, reason number 4 for statement number 4 is the reflexive property. Then statement number 5 says triangle GJH is congruent to triangle IHJ. Remember, the very last statement matches up with whatever you're trying to prove. And then what's my reason going to be? Okay, well, we look at the picture. I have enough information to say the 2 triangles are congruent. I have 2 sides. I have an angle in both triangles that are equal, and the angles in between the 2 sides. So this would be side, angle, side. Okay, hopefully that makes sense on number 7 right there. Let's move on. Let's do another one. We got time here. Okay, classes are a little bit longer today. So let's go ahead and let's see. Which one should we do next? Let's go ahead and let's turn to page. Let's see, what page do we want to turn to? 1, 2, we were just on page 3. 4, let's turn to page 5. So we're right here. We're on the 5th page. Let's go ahead and let's do number 3. All right, I like number 3 because we're going to have to fill out all the statements. We're going to have to fill out all the reasons. So let's go ahead and read what's given to us. Given that angle BAC is congruent to angle DEC, a second given is C is the midpoint of line segment AE. We are going to prove that triangle ABC, look at that. I got a new color. You didn't even see me do it. ABC, which I just outlined in orange, is congruent to triangle EDC, which I'm coloring in green. So to give you a visual, I am going to prove that the orange triangle is congruent to the green triangle. There. Okay? I know, magical! Right there. I switched colors on you. And I did it without you even noticing. I did it when I got my chimichanga. Alright, so what do we write? Statement number 1. Well, we're going to write the first given. Angle BAC is congruent to angle DEC. What's my reason for that? That came from my given. Okay, now, I just said two angles were congruent, so I have to mark it in my picture. So BAC, start at B, move along to A, turn towards C, right where you turn is the angle. So right there, that's angle BAC. It's congruent to DEC. Start at D, move over to E, take a turn for C, right where you take the turn, that angle there. So those are the two angles that are congruent. Okay? Then let's write the next given. We have another given. C is the midpoint of line segment AE. Alright, so C is the midpoint of AE, and how did we know that? Well, that was given. Once again, because statement number 2 does not specifically say that something is congruent, I don't make any marks in my picture to show that anything's congruent. But I'm going to use statement number 2 and use my knowledge of the word midpoint. So you got to visualize this. Point C is in the middle of line segment AE. So if you remember a midpoint, what it does is, and if we went to these notes right here from Friday, you could see in this box right here, it says reason sides are congruent. There are 3 reasons why sides could be congruent. It could be given, you could use the definition of midpoint, or we could use reflexive property. Definition of midpoint, a midpoint will create 2 congruent sides. Okay, so anytime you see midpoint, you need to know, based on your knowledge about geometry, it's going to create 2 congruent sides. So C, visualize it, is going to create 2 congruent sides of A to E. So that would be A to C and E to C. And we're going to write that down. So line segment A to C is congruent to line segment E to C. I hope that makes sense. How did I know that? Well, I used the definition of midpoint. Midpoint always creates 2 congruent sides. Okay? Okay, statement number 4. If you notice, I don't have enough information yet to say that the 2 triangles are congruent, but I've used up, I can't get any more information, from my given. So what do? Well, what I have to do now is I have to look at my diagram and I have to find something else that I know absolutely, positively, without a doubt has to be congruent. And you should notice right here that that angle has to be congruent to that angle because of vertical angles. Okay, remember we talked about this in class. The people who write these problems will never ever mark vertical angles as equal. They just assume that you have to know that they are equal. So we need to write that. So how do I name this angle? That would be angle BCA. So angle BCA is congruent. How do I name this angle? That would be angle DCE. Remember, we use 3 letters to name an angle. DCE, and my reason for that is vertical angles. We know that vertical angles are always congruent to each other. Okay, now look at the picture. Do I have enough marks? Do I have enough information to say the orange triangle is congruent to the green triangle? I do, so I'm ready to write my last statement. And remember, the strategy is always what you write in the last statement is the actual part that you're trying to prove. So I'm going to write triangle ABC is congruent to triangle EDC. And then what's my reason? Which rule applies? Notice I have 2 angles that are congruent in each triangle, and I have a side that's congruent. So my reason could be, I'll write it over here just so you can see. So it could be angle, side, angle, or is it angle, angle, side? It's one or the other. Well, the question is the side in between the angles? And you can see it is. So it's not angle, angle, side, it's angle, side, angle. So number 5, the reason would be angle, side, angle. Okay, so that's how you would do number 3. All right, okay, so let's do one more. Let's turn to the next page. What the heck? Let's do number 1 on right here where it says sample HL proofs. So let's go ahead and do number 1 here. Okay, so given triangle LMP and triangle MNP are right triangles, line segment ML is congruent to line segment MN, we're going to prove that triangle LMP, so triangle LMP, I just highlighted in orange, is congruent to triangle MNP, which I'm highlighted in green. This gives you a visual of which two triangles we're proving are congruent to each other. Okay, so here we go. So let's go ahead and do it. So notice the statements have already been written for you. Statement number 1, triangle LMP and triangle MNP are right triangles. How did I know that? That reason was given. Okay, now I'm going to make sure that both of the triangles are marked as right triangles. You can see the orange triangle, LMP, is marked as a right triangle, but the green one is not. So I'm just going to add in the right triangle box there, so I can mark that they are both right triangles. Okay? All right, statement number 2. ML, I have another given. ML is congruent to MN, so that's statement number 2, and the reason for that is given. Now, I just said that two parts are congruent, so I'm going to mark that in my picture. Segment ML is congruent to side MN. I'm going to mark that with tick marks. Okay. Statement number 3, MP is congruent to MP. So we're saying that this line right here is equal to itself in both triangles. I'm going to mark that. What's my reason for that? Remember, that is the reflexive property. So we're going to write reflexive property. And then lastly, you probably notice that the last statement, triangle LMP is congruent to triangle MNP, is the proof statement. That's the strategy that we always use. Whatever you're proving goes in your last statement. Okay, now what's the reason for that? All right, so how do I know that the two triangles are congruent? Well, we have right triangles. That's important. Okay, now if you notice in the right triangles, the hypotenuses are the same, and then one of the legs is the same. So the reason here would be HL. Okay? So that would be how you do number 1. Okay, so here is the rest of your assignment that you have. All right, so turn back to the front page and let's just kind of work through this so there's no confusion as to what problems you're going to do. I also have these written on the back wall under the Friday section, which today is Uncle Sam Day. So happy day to Uncle Sam. Okay, all right, so I assigned you, we're on page 1. Okay, so we're back on page 1. So I assigned you numbers 1 and numbers 2 on Wednesday or Thursday. Turn to page 2. I assigned you number 3 and number 4 on page 2 on Wednesday or Thursday. So you should already have those done, and we did number 3 just now together. Turn to page 3. I assigned you number 6 on Wednesday or Thursday. We just did number 5, so you should have that done on page 3. And we did number 7, so you should have page 3 completely done. If you didn't have number 6 done yet, you just didn't do the work that I assigned you on Wednesday or Thursday. Turn to page 4. So page 4, neither of the proofs are done, so you need to do both of those proofs. So you're going to do number 1 and number 2 on page 4. Okay, turn to page 5. I've already done number 3 for you, so that should be done. And then I want you to go down to the bottom and I want you to complete number 4. Turn to page 6. Page 6, I just did number 1 for you. I want you to do number 2. Now, the lights just went out again. Those darn chimichangas. Alright, those darn chimichangas suck away a lot of juice from my microwave. Sorry, I had to go trip the breaker again. Anyhow, page 6, you're doing number 2. And then if you turn to the last page, you will notice, well, it's the last page that has any problems on it, you will notice that there are 12 problems. I want you to do all 12 of these. Okay, and on these problems, what you're doing is you're comparing the triangles and you're just writing side, side, side which rule applies. And if there's no rule that applies, just simply write not enough information. So these 12 problems you're doing like the pink paper that you did on Tuesday. Okay, that would be your homework. This is all expected to be done on Monday. Okay, once again, have a wonderful weekend. I will see you guys on Monday. Okay, and be nice to one another.